Well, Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts. Today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
Jake Paul joking about steroids, regardless of intent, felt like a self-inflicted wound. Bravado under suspicion doesn't read as innocence. It reads as provocation. And when past testing controversies resurface, patterns suddenly appear far sharper than they ever did in isolation. At that point, no PR team, no lawyer, and no podcast appearance can fully erase the damage once people start paying real attention.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you knew he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. You know, I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Yeah, like there was a point where, you know, I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, you know, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that like violence war thing between us, like after he slapped me, I wanted to, you know, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
What truly changed after the Joshua fight wasn't the loss itself, but the behavior of the audience. Fans stopped laughing and started investigating, slowing down footage, comparing timelines, and asking questions. Once spectators turn into analysts, the spectacle ends and accountability takes over. The Calabasas raid visuals matter because optics often outweigh explanations. Aerial footage of federal agents removing evidence from a mansion leaves a permanent imprint on public memory, one that no press release, charity mention, or motivational speech can completely erase.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was 100% scripted. Mike Tyson repeatedly bit his boxing glove throughout the fight. When fights are scripted, fighters do weird gestures to signal that they're hurt. It's very possible Mike Tyson was biting on his glove to tell Jake Paul to calm down. Now, if that's not enough proof that this fight was scripted, in the middle of the fight, Mike Tyson is literally talking to Jake Paul while they are clinching.
The rapid escalation from influencer boxing to heavyweight exposure and then to federal scrutiny happened with stunning speed. It raises an uncomfortable question. Who believed momentum was protection? History is full of figures who thought their brands were untouchable right before reality intervened. Anthony Joshua exits this chapter largely intact, his professionalism reinforcing his legacy. Jake Paul, however, faces a far harsher crossroads. His identity was built on silencing doubters, and now those doubts have moved from the fringe into mainstream discussion, which is a brutal place to exist publicly.
That's definitely a crazy fight because of the weight differences. The weight difference in there, I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. You know, for me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, you know, of the weight difference, and, you know, Joshua is a former, you know, champion. And also, you know, he's active, you know, and this is going to be the first time that we see Paul, you know, fighting an active fighter. You know what I mean? We seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, you know what I'm saying? It's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional, you know.
This moment isn't about victory or defeat anymore. It's accountability knocking louder than ever. Whether Jake Paul opens that door or resists, it will determine how this chapter is remembered, not the fight itself. I keep returning to Anthony Joshua because he didn't just outbox Jake Paul. He punctured a narrative. He showed what happens when real experience meets curated spectacle. The unsettling part is that Joshua didn't posture or chase clout. He simply did his job and left behind footage that quietly dismantled months of carefully managed expectations.
Discussion, any agreement about, hey, you need to get the fight into this round, you need to carry him for X amount of rounds, you need to do your part to get it into the 5th, 6th, or whatever?
Absolutely no way ever. I mean, if you look at a couple of the right hands that AJ missed with in the first couple of rounds, like they would have done the same job on Jake's jaw if they would have landed. And Jake did very well to avoid them. So I always said going into the fight, AJ's not the kind of guy that's going to come out like a train, just start swinging away. He's going to take his time, and that's what he did. You know, the fight definitely went a few more rounds than anticipated from Anthony, but it's like, even now, it's like, yeah, it was definitely a fix. Some guy commented today on one of my posts, yeah, it was definitely a fix. I go, you do know that he's broken his jaw in 2 places.
Jake Paul's boxing persona was engineered around control. Control of opponents, pacing, messaging, and outcomes. When that control slipped under Anthony Joshua's steady pressure, the shockwave extended far beyond the ring. Promoters, defenders, and fans felt the brand wobble in real time. The reason the FBI angle carries so much weight isn't hype or rumor. Federal attention reframes everything. Investigations focus on patterns, money flow, and coordination. Once gambling, sportsbooks, and international betting enter the conversation, the story stops feeling like influencer drama and starts feeling far more serious.
Rated by the FBI, multiple news organizations report. You can see in this aerial footage agents in uniform outside his home in Calabasas. Ernie told Reuters he would cooperate with the federal investigation.
What's gonna look like after his boxing career?
People think I do steroids and all this shit, so I have a plan. Because I think it's fucking bizarre. That's like the only excuse they can come up with is like rigged fights. Jake Paul does steroids. So after boxing, I'm gonna do a cycle of steroids to show people what Jake Paul on steroids actually looks like, because I want to shut people the fuck up.
I don't believe Logan Paul lacks intelligence, which is exactly why the sudden quiet, cautious language, and visible tension matter. People who understand media cycles rarely retreat unless they see variables they can't outmaneuver. That posture feels less like confidence and more like internal crisis management. Mike Tyson's involvement became an emotional fault line for fans because legends carry decades of muscle memory and trust. When a 60-year-old icon behaves in unfamiliar ways, viewers instinctively rewind footage, analyze moments, and ask questions. Once analysis replaces reaction, narrative momentum shifts permanently.
There has never once in Jake Paul's career been any talk of that sort, of anything to do with the fight being anything but a real fight that has exactly the same situation as any professional fight. And that's exactly the same thing here for the Anthony Joshua fight. It's just beyond mind-blowing that people would think that. Anthony Joshua was on record saying that if he didn't finish him in the first round, that would be disappointing, that it would be a failure. The narrative changed as we got closer to fight night and obviously post-fight, and I understand why, but they were pretty adamant it would take max 2 rounds to knock out Jake Paul.
Defensive tone stood out. Promoters are usually comfortable operating in gray areas, yet his framing sounded like someone anticipating scrutiny rather than dismissing noise. Even mentioning the possibility of an investigation invites people to ask why that possibility exists at all. The leaked Tyson script continues to linger because real conspiracies are never clean. They're messy and only partially aligned. When enough details overlap imperfectly, it starts to feel less like fan fiction and more like a rough working document, especially after Anthony Joshua's performance amplified existing doubts.
Let me know your thoughts on Jake going 6 rounds with AJ.
You know, the fact that he did that, it was good because, you know, we didn't think it was going to go 6 rounds. We thought it was going to go 2. So the fact that he made 6 rounds is an accomplishment for Jake Paul.
Was there anything that stuck out with you from the fight?
Yeah, really, who was in better shape? I thought that Joshua was in great shape compared to, you know, Jake Paul, because he was running around the ring.
You guys gotta walk,
and that takes out a lot of energy, especially when you're not used to it.
Paulie Malignaggi's commentary resonated because it didn't sound bitter or personal. It sounded analytical, almost relieved, like a veteran recognizing that public perception is finally catching up to private conversations fighters have had for years. When that alignment happens, credibility quietly changes hands. Nick Issa Bidarian's media appearances added fuel instead of clarity. Repeatedly acknowledging boxing's history of corruption while insisting total innocence doesn't reassure skeptical fans. It reminds them how thin the line is between entertainment and manipulation in a sport that has broken trust before. What this moment is really about isn't verdicts, it's perception, pressure, and consequence. In boxing and celebrity culture, damage often occurs long before facts are finalized, and Jake Paul is now living in that uncomfortable gap. Names like Anthony Joshua suddenly feel symbolic rather than incidental. AJ represents an old-school standard where preparation, risk, and legacy matter more than clicks. When that standard collides with influencer-era boxing, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Jake Paul didn't just lose control in the ring, he lost control of the conversation. Once public dialogue slips beyond your grip, especially when journalists, fighters, and analysts start asking the same questions, charisma alone can't pull it back. Eddie Hearn's caution felt less like distancing and more like recognition that the environment had shifted and familiar tactics wouldn't work anymore. Logan Paul's silence feels strategic, not emotional. An understanding that sometimes saying nothing preserves options when the future is uncertain. Mike Tyson's involvement continues to unsettle fans because legends occupy sacred space. When that space feels compromised, people don't just question the moment, they question everything around it, including who benefits and who remains protected. Paulie Malignaggi's blunt calmness cuts through the noise precisely because he gains nothing from exaggeration. This isn't personal beef, it's structural discomfort. Jake Paul's confidence, once magnetic, now feels risky. Confidence without clarity can look like avoidance, and audiences crave transparency more than bravado. Betting conversations fundamentally change the tone. When fans suspect money influences outcomes, entertainment turns into ethical concern, and ethical concern invites scrutiny no promoter can fully contain. Anthony Joshua doesn't need to comment because his career isn't built on controlling narratives. That difference matters more than any punch thrown. Boxing itself feels uneasy watching this unfold because every controversy reopens the sport's oldest wounds, and honest fighters often pay the reputational price for someone else's spectacle. This moment doesn't feel like an ending, but a forced pause, the kind where careers either mature or unravel depending on how honestly they respond to pressure. Jake Paul's next chapter won't be defined by Joshua, Tyson, Logan Paul, or Eddie Hearn. It will be defined by whether he confronts skepticism with substance instead of spectacle. Because once trust is broken, only reality can rebuild it.